Well, we are still following the latest developments out of Washington, D.C. President Trump firing Attorney General Jeff Sessions. But the question is, will this matter for the market and, of course, for your money? Let's bring in Mattie Duppler, senior fellow at the National Taxpayers Union. Mattie, we've learned through history since 1950 that when there is a Republican in the White House, markets love a divided Congress. Is that going to be the case this time around?
Yeah, certainly. Well, when you look at yesterday and this next week coming up, when you need to look at the economy and look at the market performing, keep in mind that typically the market does perform well the quarter after a midterm election. So I would think it'd be a mistake to mistake this enthusiasm for optimism. You're right. Divided government is something that the market craves, mostly because it's kind of the Hippocratic Oath approach of markets. The fact that there's not going to be large-scale changes to government policy is generally something the market responds favorably to. So that certainly, I think, could be expected. And remember, too, a lot of the business enthusiasm that we've seen over the last year has been a result of not just tax cuts and policy coming out of the building behind me, but as a result of the Trump deregulatory agenda, which, of course, can continue unabated regardless of what the makeup is of Congress. And I think we can expect to see that in the coming years as well. So I think that the market response is certainly not surprising. And we'll see, as you mentioned with Aaron before, if that has legs continuing into next year.
So, Mattie, are there places that we should be watching? We've spoken a lot over the last couple of weeks leading up to the election about the idea that certain industries are in focus because of the elections, financial services perhaps healthcare, that's a big one. What exactly should investors be keying on given this new environment that's taking shape?
Right. I mean, this is the favorite pastime of Washington, D.C., which is what do the midterms augur for the next 2 years before we see another election cycle? For me, I'm more focused on what happens in the coming weeks. I think there's a couple areas of volatility that investors need to be paying attention to. One, of course, is in December. We're looking at another Fed hike. What does that mean for a market reaction? I think that you might see the president start to change some of his tone when it comes to the Fed. We, of course, have seen President Trump be very critical of the Fed and the expectation that they may raise rates. But of course, with Democrats coming in now, this could be an opportunity for the president to put some pressure on the opposite party and say, listen, if the economic conditions are going to be tightening as a result of central bank movement, the party that controls the other chamber needs to articulate an economic vision. Democrats have been very cavalier about wanting to repeal the tax cuts and really go for the throat of the Trump economic agenda. They may need to actually put their money where their mouth is and put some votes on the floor if that's going to be the case. And I think that a Fed rate hike could create the conditions where the president can make those demands. But certainly also in December, federal government funding runs out in the first week there. That, of course, will offer opportunity. Sectors that are very attached to government spending may see some movement there. But again, in 2010, the last time that Nancy Pelosi was Speaker, the government funding fight was one that she actually lost and had to punt into the new Congress when Republicans took over. So this typically has been an area of leverage for Republicans, and Democrats have not been able to extract concessions. So federal government funding is certainly a fight that I think will factor heavily into what happens in the coming year. And then lastly, trade. We're, of course, up against an actual deadline on trade. January 1, the last tranche of $200 billion worth of Chinese goods that received a 10% tariff are scheduled to go into effect to 25%. And that obviously is going to create a lot of downward pressure that both Democrats and Republicans now are going to have to respond to now that Democrats have control of one chamber of Congress. It'll be interesting to see going into the next year when the new NAFTA or the USMCA agreement is now on the board, how those discussions about trade affect the tenor and the temperament of Democrats and Republicans as we head into the new year.
So many things to watch, and you just to the tip of the iceberg, Mattie Duppler.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for that update. Mattie Duppler of the National Taxpayers Union. Well, let's get a check on the markets right now, because after a big day yesterday, we are seeing what we're going to call it stability for this time being.